Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I'm very, very honored and excited to be interviewing a very special space champion, Dr. Emily Rice. Dr. Rice is an astronomy professor at the Macaulay Honors College in the City University of New York. In addition to her scientific contributions to the study of atmospheric properties of low mass astronomical bodies, she has become well known for her astronomy related public outreach projects. Dr. Rice is also the co-founder of the astro-centric fashion shop STARtorialist, a host for the public outreach series Astronomy on Tap, a parody video creator, and a current research associate for the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. She has appeared as a guest on the popular podcast StarTalk and was a host for their spinoff show StarTalk All-Stars. Dr. Rice also served as a public presenter at the Hayden Planetarium in New York. I met Dr. Rice at an outreach event here in New York City, and I was simply inspired by not only her research, but her passion for astrophysics and everything space. So I'm very excited to learn about Dr. Rice's journey into the aerospace sector, her current work, and her endeavors of communicating her passion for aerospace and astrophysics with the rest of the world. So welcome, Dr. Rice. Thank you so much for taking your time to inspire the next generation of aerospace leaders.
Hi, I'm so excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, to just kick off our conversation, I wanted to first start off talking about your role as a professor. I think going into the aerospace field, research is kind of at the forefront of innovation, and everything that we do in academia is really one of the top careers to pursue in the aerospace sector, and especially in astrophysics. So I wanted to start off by talking about your current research. So what does your day-to-day kind of role entail as a professor and your current research? What are you currently working on?
Yeah, so being a professor is really cool. Like, it's not anything that I really had as a goal or anything like that. And when you start out in graduate school in the sciences, it's kind of typical for people to assume that that's your goal because that's who you're learning from for the most part. Um, but I also had heard and kind of absorbed that it was very, very competitive. There were so few jobs available that most people like left academia and did other things. Um, but I got after I went to graduate school, I got a postdoc at the American Museum of Natural History, which is kind of a weird it's not a college or university, but they still do research. Now it is officially a graduate school because there's a graduate program in biology, actually, and so it doesn't really relate to the astrophysics. But it was still a really fun place to do a postdoc. And I moved to New York City for the first time, and I loved living in New York City. I learned about the CUNY system when I was in New York City, and so then I applied for my faculty job, or applied for kind of permanent jobs, and got the first faculty job that I had, which is at the College of Staten Island of CUNY. And now I'm at the Macaulay Honors College, but I've been in the CUNY system for about 13 years now. And what surprised me is how kind of flexible and creative the job can be. Because I never really thought of it like what I would do or anything like that, but it was a really natural continuation of the research and wanting to stay in New York City. And luckily, I had co-founded my research group, which is called BDNYC, for brown dwarfs in New York City, which is one of the types of astronomical objects that we study. Really, even before I got my faculty position, like I found my co-founders were also located at the museum. So one of them is Kelly Cruz, who was a postdoc at AMNH and also a professor at Hunter College of CUNY, and then Jackie Faherty, who started out as kind of a graduate student doing research at AMNH, even though she was a graduate student at SUNY Stony Brook. But all three of us overlapped and realized we were doing brown dwarf research, and we were like, let's start our own research group together. And at the time, like, we had all had male advisors in our careers. Like, we hadn't really had female research role models. They were very, very limited in astrophysics, even just like 15 years or so ago. And so we founded our research group, and luckily we all ended up getting kind of more permanent jobs in New York City. And we kind of also expanded the research. So the brown dwarfs were like our key objects. They're these astronomical objects that are lower mass than stars. And so sometimes people call them failed stars, but we kind of don't like to think of them in a negative term like that. But we also expanded to very low mass stars, and then also to very massive exoplanets. And so there's this kind of really gray area between stars and planets that you might think, oh, thinking of our solar system, like the sun and Jupiter are very, very different. But there's actually a lot of objects out there that are in between the sun and Jupiter and their properties and overlap with a lot of those properties. And so that's what we did. And the day-to-day was kind of all over the place. Like some days I would be teaching classes, sometimes I would be working with students, like mentoring research students. Some days I would be working on grants or working on papers or working on computer code or something like that, going to conferences, creating the presentations or the posters for conferences, doing service work in the department, so going to meetings and meetings and meetings. That seems like all academics do sometimes. And then just trying to get tenure. So tenure in academia is this wonderful thing that is basically job security. Like once you're at an institution doing well enough, however they define that, for 5 to 7 years, they give you tenure. And then you basically can't get fired. And you have even more flexibility to really do what you want. And so now I'm kind of on the other side of that. I'm an associate professor. I have tenure. I've transferred institutions within the CUNY system. I have kind of even more flexibility to do these creative things. And so that's why I've started to do a lot more work with STARtorialist and with Astronomy on Tap. Because what I found is that I really love sharing the space. And that I like, doing research is great and doing research is absolutely necessary for science. Like the science doesn't happen without the research, but there's also so many other things that go into science progressing. And all of those things are important too. And when I kind of started out, I don't know if I was explicitly trained or at least implicitly trained that like all those other things are ancillary and you should care about the research the most. But I like all of those other things actually more. Some of those other things I like more, and they all are also very important for getting science done. And so now I focus on those other things. But the beautiful thing is that that can be what I do in academia because I get to choose what I do. And so it's very different, I think, from most traditional kind of in academia, we call the jobs outside of academia like industry jobs a lot of the time. So working for aerospace companies, or you can also work for government labs, or in astronomy, it's observatories very often where people work, or science centers, or things like that. In some places, you have similar flexibility and stability after a certain period of time, but it's it's a still a relatively unique thing, I think, to academia, which is very, very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I have to just first off start off by saying I am simply inspired to see a female scientist like you. I think, there's this visual portrayed even to this day, which is crazy to think that a lot of scientists look a certain way, or not even look a certain way, but act a certain way, or have to be confined into this specific box of what they do. And I think it's just so amazing to hear all the things you're a part of. And I think just with those like few minutes that you just talked about what you were doing, there were just so much happening. And I think that just kind of breaking out of that box or that narrative we tend to put these scientists in, or these like hardcore astrophysics researchers in, and it's just really amazing and inspiring to see, especially for like aspiring scientists like myself. And so really going into like, I have like so many questions that popped up as you were talking, but specifically about, I think a lot of students right now are especially fascinated with the idea of exoplanets. And I know you briefly mentioned that. I think the idea of like finding planets that look or might have the same composition as Earth is quite fascinating. I remember when I was like around 8th or 9th grade, I discovered the idea of exoplanets, and I was like, wait, does that like confirm our hypothesis of aliens? And just the idea of exoplanets was so exciting to me. So can you talk a little bit about exoplanets? And I guess what are your thoughts about like this current, I know a lot of us are focused on like Europa, or trying to discover really what's in our solar system or in our backyard right now, which completely makes sense. But where do you see the future or like the research of exoplanets going in the next maybe 10 years?
Yeah, so exoplanets are huge and it's new, which is very, very cool. New within the last like 25, 30 years, maybe, like on the broadest, but like the progression that we've made and even the last few years is amazing. Um And it's definitely like part of understanding our solar system. So exoplanets are planets in other solar systems, so planets that orbit around stars other than the sun. And there's a lot of different ways we study them. Most of those ways are indirect detection methods, and so we're very limited to the amount of detail that we can actually observe about the planet. Usually, we're actually studying the star and studying the effects of the planet on the star in order to figure out what the planet is like. And so things like mass, things like radius, these kind of basic fundamental properties, or even that there's a planet there, like even, how common exoplanets are is still a little bit of an open question. But from some NASA missions in the last couple of decades, so things like the Kepler mission, the K2 mission, the TESS mission is currently going on. We actually now think that exoplanets are ubiquitous. Like they are very, very common throughout the galaxy, probably mostly because we see a lot of them and we haven't looked that hard, which is just mind blowing to think of. Like we didn't know, maybe 10 years ago, like how common exoplanets are. But at the same time, like, so that's opened up a whole new world for us. But at the same time, we're both not really sensitive to very solar system like planets, because of the how we're limited by our detection methods and by our technology and things like that. And so we haven't really found true Earth analogs or really true solar system analogs. And so that still leaves an open question of how common our solar system is and how common, an Earth-like planet really, really is. We don't know. But we've also found all of these other planets that are not anything like we have in our solar system. They're big planets closer into their stars. They're planets in between the size of Earth and Uranus and Neptune, which we don't have in our solar system. And so it's like, okay, how did these things form? How common are they? Like we didn't even know that they could exist before we only had the idea of our solar system. And so it's useful to know all of these things in order to help put our solar system into context as well. And we're trying to figure out, okay, could there have been life on Mars in the past? That's still a very open question. Could there be life currently in the liquid oceans under the surface of Europa, under the surface of Enceladus? Those are still very open questions. And so kind of exploring both the solar system and other solar systems helps us create a full picture of these exoplanets. And it's just super cool to even to think that this is what we're doing and this is what we're capable of is just mind blowing. Like I still, I pinch myself when we get into the weeds and we start to talk about the data and its little numbers and error bars and things like that and these kind of relatively mundane things, and I'm like, this is a planet around another star. Like it's amazing to think of.
Yeah, and just as you were speaking, I could just see how many questions that we need to be able to ask, and how much we just don't know yet about our own solar system, yet about another solar system, another.
Yeah.
It's just really crazy how vast this universe is. Every time, I
Yeah.
know we talk about this all the time. It's just the questions that come out of it, and how much more we need to do, and how we really just scratch like barely the surface of everything is it's just really mind blowing and very exciting to see where we will go in the next 20, 30 years with our
Yeah.
research and how much we can discover with the more advanced tools that we're creating. And I'm just really excited about this field. And another aspect of your career and about the work that you're doing that really excited me, which I even mentioned before we started this interview, was your work with combining this idea of fashion and space together. And I know when you're trying to venture to start something new, it can always be really difficult, but you need to have a moment of inspiration that really motivates you to take it far and make it a reality. And so I'm really curious to learn about what was the inspiration for you behind founding the astro-centric fashion shop STARtorialist. What was your inspiration and what's your vision for it in the next few years?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, StarTalk has been really, really fun. Like, I'll admit that you talked before about like the stereotype of a scientist, which is generally like a white nerdy guy. Um, and I've been really lucky that like that hasn't fully been my experience, which is really, really nice. But at the same time, I still, especially when I was kind of coming up in my career on the tenure track. I wanted people to take me seriously. And so I thought that was also like, okay, I can't be seen as caring about other things, especially not superficial things like, the way I dress or makeup or anything like that. And so I kind of, kept that a little bit quiet and like tried to focus on my research kind of full throttle. But I always had that like creative stuff in the background. And when I came to New York City, it was really nice that like I found other people who were also had that kind of creative streak. And so when I was doing outreach stuff and on the tenure track, I was like really excited when I found like spacey themed clothes or jewelry or something, and I would wear them. Like it's full on Professor Frizzle or something like that. But I wasn't the only person, which was really cool. And so the idea for STARtorialist actually came from myself and my friend Summer Ash, who was director of outreach at Columbia in the astrophysics department at the time, and we like crossed paths doing outreach events and things like that, and noticed that we were both wearing like the galaxy shirts or leggings or star jewelry or something like that, and we were like, this is so cool that we can find some of this stuff. And we compared notes about like what we were looking for, where we were shopping and things like that. But had New York City budgets and New York City closets, and we were like, okay, what's a smarter way of doing this? And so we sat down and we said we should really have a blog. Like this is also kind of peak blog era, like about 10 years ago. And so we sat down one day and we brainstormed, and we got the idea to just kind of catalog things that we had found, and write up little posts about like what was accurate about it, what was inaccurate about it, like if it was a real image, and then which telescope it was from, what it showed, and oh, this is Saturn, but they call it Jupiter or something like that. Like finding the little mistakes because scientists will always do that. Um, and what I didn't expect, and we were also like, we were definitely not the only person dressing like thematically like that, which was really fun. But what I didn't expect for it to like catch on kind of so quickly among the other astronomers. So like we had our blog, and we really thought our blog would be like public facing. And it like gained popularity a little bit on Tumblr, which was very fun. Um, but then we presented it at research conferences. So like at the scientific conference, the National Conference for Astronomers, they always, you have your research posters, your talks and things like that, but they also have posters for education and public outreach. And so we said, we can talk about StarTorialist there. And so we did. And I really thought, like, I was actually terrified the night before. I had a nightmare that like the little
Oh
old white
no.
dudes were going to come up to my poster and be like, get out of here. This is not America's Next Top Model. This is not Project Runway. Like, get lost. And really, they did come up to the poster and they were like, this is great. I love it. Where do I buy? I want to get a present for my wife. I want to get presents for my grandkids. Like, I have never been so swamped in a conference poster before that day. And so it was really fun to share it with our colleagues and to see what they had. Like, it felt like everybody kind of came out of the woodwork in support of this little project. And so that was really, really fun. And it just kind of grew from there in ways that I really didn't anticipate. And so we got invited to kind of host a booth at the conference, which is usually observatories or colleges or missions. NASA will have a booth, NSF will have a booth. But the woman who was in charge of the exhibit hall where all the booths were at the conference was like, we used to have vendors, like we used to have people selling T-shirts or people selling jewelry, but they got priced out of the conference as it grew. Why don't you guys do that instead? And we were like, okay. And so the first one we had samples. We didn't really sell anything, but through the blog we had found kind of other like independent designers and small family run shops and Etsy shops and things like that that were doing space themed things, like in a surprisingly huge variety of things. And so we kind of pooled everybody together. We got samples, we had them out on display. We had discount codes and we had their business cards and stuff like that. And it was cool, but it definitely didn't translate to the sales that we wanted it to for those companies. And so the next year, my colleague, like my research collaborator, Kelly Cruz, who is secretly like a QuickBooks accounting nerd, was like, she had already incorporated a consulting business. And she said, I can do wholesale and retail for you guys. Like, we can do this. And so the year after our kind of showcase booth, we wholesaled and retailed at the conferences and paid our sales tax, everything above board. And it was also super surprising that it went so well. And so we've been doing that every year. That was in, let's see, 2018, I think was our first like actual, we called it a pop-up shop now. And they were doing them more and more frequently, but then the lockdown happened. And so during the lockdown, it was actually the woman who had gotten us into the exhibit hall said, "Why don't I set up the online shop for you?" And so we were thinking about it before that. We never really had the opportunity when we could no longer travel and we had all this time on our hands. She had all this time. I had two little kids at home, so I didn't do anything. But she set up the full online shop and we launched it. It'll be about 4 years ago this summer that we launched the online shop. And so what's surprising to me is that it wasn't my like, I need to do an online shop or anything like that. It was just so popular among the astronomers and the public, and also like scratched this itch that I kind of didn't know that I had. It's very fun, kind of finding things and then sourcing them and getting them on the website to share with our audience. It's really fun kind of using the astronomy images and figuring out how they're going to look nice. Like I designed this shirt, and so I'm backwards. It's a JDWST image, but I put the stars on the shoulder and stuff like that. Kind of finding designs that people have made that are the intersection of art and science, and all these kind of little things that go into it are actually very, very fun, challenging, because the stop, you have to sell stuff in order to make money, and like the marketing and the promotion and the sales and things like that is something that I wasn't always comfortable with. But I've learned a lot doing it, and I learned a lot about collaborations with, especially with different types of people, and incorporating different skill sets and things like that. And so it's been really, really fun to do that. And it's like fully leaning into the fact that like we don't have to hide who we are. We don't have to be these cookie cutter, stereotypical scientists. Like we can combine the things that we love. One of my favorite designs is a replica of ice skating costume, because the Nathan, oh no, I'm blanking on his name. Nathan Chen, the US figure skater, was wearing like space themed costumes. He had one that was inspired by Star Trek, and he had one that was it was this kind of purple, red, yellow, orange, like just a long sleeve top. But astronomers saw it. It was at the Winter Olympics a couple of years ago, and they were like, "That's a real image." And so, sure enough, we kind of figured out where the image came from. It had been kind of recolored, and so we had our designer recolor it in the same way, and we made a top out of it, and people and a dress and a skirt and things like that, and people love it, because there's this intersection of people that love ice skating things and love space as well. And so finding these kind of weird overlaps are like, I love it when I find like, I have my Google alerts for STARtorialist, and I love it when it pops up on like the figure skating forum. Like, who knew? It's so fun though.
And I think you're doing such an important job of bringing in two unique groups together, or like just multiple different groups together through this idea of fashion. And I think that's why, this is just such a cool little endeavor. And it's not even little, it's like a really huge endeavor. And yeah, and it's like, it's touching so many people who may not necessarily see themselves in a space career, but then are starting to think about it or just like educate themselves about what's happening, by finding these unique, cool intersections with, and space images are so pretty. Like I know when they're like the first James Webb Space Telescope pictures came out, everybody was like parting it, changing their phone backgrounds, and it was just, such like a cool moment for just this whole generation. And just fashion brings in that really cool excitement about different things, different topics. And I think what you're doing is such an important job. And when you were talking, I could really see not only your enthusiasm and passion for the research you're conducting, but even this new endeavor. And I think it speaks honestly on your excitement for space and your excitement for this, industry. And I'm curious to learn, like, what was your aha moment that got you into this space? I feel like we all are born as innate explorers, but usually there's like a TV show or maybe like a moment or a museum visit or just like some moment where you're like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Did you have one of those aha moments that inspired you to enter academia, astrophysics, and kind of just pursue what you're doing right now?
Yeah, like not really, which I think is unusual, but also really cool. Like I was always a nerd in school, like that I definitely like I got good grades and stuff like that. I used to like be ashamed of it, weirdly enough, like because I thought it was bad to be a nerd. Um but now I realize that that's like, that's so not everything there is. But like that was me as a kid. But then I was best at math, and so I thought, oh, I should do the thing that I'm best at. And so when I started college, I thought I was going to major in math, and so I took my first semester freshman year of college. I took the classes that I needed in the math major, but then I also took an astronomy class. That was my like, this looks interesting. Who knows? And I had read like maybe one book about space in high school, and it was a Timothy Ferris book. I remember. So it was either The Coming of Age of the in the Milky Way or The Whole Shebang are kind of two of his popular science books. And I was like, this is really cool. I didn't know you could really study it. And so I took the astronomy class, I took the math class. Um, and the math class, I couldn't, I did not like it. And I was like, okay, if this is what's ahead of me in the math major, like I'm not really into it. But the astronomy class, I was like, wait a second, this is amazing. And we stayed, it was a small class in a big room. And I remember it like very distinctly when it met and how often it met. And the instructor had no sense of the class time. And so we would ask questions. And if we asked questions, especially towards the end of the class period, he would just keep talking. And like whoever had asked the question felt guilty and like stayed. And so the next class we would come back and be like, how long did you stay? How long did you stay? Because everybody else would kind of sneak out while he was talking to one particular person. But we loved it. And so I was like, what do I have to do to take the rest of the astronomy classes? And the answer turned out to be major in physics. And I was like, okay, I didn't like hate physics. I also took physics classes in high school and I did fine at it. And so I was like, okay, I can major in physics in order to do the rest of these astronomy classes. But I never had a like, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life moment. Like, if anything, it's just like, does it still interest me now? Like, yep, then I'm going to keep doing it. And luckily, like I said, with tenure in academia, it's amazing because it's also, if something else interests me, like I'm not going to totally jump ship and try to go into, something totally, totally different. But like, now I can do the other fun things. Like this semester, the class that I taught was really kind of a film class. And so it was looking at like science and scientists on screens. And so film and TV, social media, YouTube streamers, and how science is portrayed, how science is communicated, who are the scientists, what are they doing, what roles do they play in the stories and things like that. That's not what I thought I would be teaching. But it was really fun to do that and to explore and to kind of share, like really emphasize that science really is interdisciplinary and there's a cultural importance to science, and a kind of, you can take sociological or even anthropological perspectives on it and things like that. It's something that I haven't gotten bored with yet, honestly. And so hopefully that'll take me on through to retirement.
That's incredible. And I think you're just doing what you love, and you don't need to necessarily have this specific defining moment in your career, which I think was really comforting to hear, especially for some students who
Yeah.
may not know what they specifically want to do in the future, but just the idea of following what excites you at that moment and kind of going down that path. And it could change at any moment, but you were like, oh, I love these astronomy classes. It's like piquing my interest. So I'm going to pursue
Yeah.
something that enables me to do that. And I think that
Yeah.
sort of mindset of following your heart, which is super cliche, but also very true because you're loving what you're doing now, which at the end of the day is the most important piece because you're having fun with it and you're able to share. When you have a professor who's not so excited about his or her job, it's, not very fun to listen to their lecture. But when you find someone who's so excited about sharing their love and their knowledge for a specific topic, it just makes more students excited about it. And I think
Yeah.
that energy really just carries through with all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, it helps get you through the hard days too. Like there's no matter what you do, there's going to be good days, there's going to be bad days. But if like the bigger picture of it is something that you love to do, that can help you through the hard days. And it's definitely like it's fully a privilege to be able to do what I love. But I think that's one of the things that like you can set yourself up for that by kind of preparing well, and by exploring all of the possibilities. And it's really I'm very, very lucky to have had the career that I've had so far.
Amazing. And so now that we're able to learn about your journey so far and some of the different work and initiatives you're a part of, my last and final question for you is if you had to go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would that advice be? I know a lot of students, you tend to look at a role model's LinkedIn or someone's resume, and you just see everything's perfect. But I'm sure you've had many moments where you had to kind of learn from a specific situation, or even just looking back at your career growth so far. I'm sure you've had some learning lessons. So if you had to like pick one piece of advice and give that to your younger self, what would that be?
I would say just do it. Like try it. Don't be afraid to take that risk. In fact, that's something that I'm still trying to tell myself now. Like I have so many other ideas, so many things that I want to do, and I'm like, maybe not now because I don't really know, and I'm not sure about the like. But the things that I've been most happiest with and most proud of are the things that we've done it. And up until now, I think I've been really lucky that like a lot of them have been motivated by other people. So STARtorialist, I had Summer. My research group, I had Kelly and Jackie. Like, there's a bunch of things that I've done like with other people, and luckily, I feel like the other people like had held my hand while I took the great leap. And I have so many of these other ideas that I would love to do, and I'm like waiting for the right time, or like maybe another, oh, but I need this one more, and it's like, no, 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 just do it. Like, you make the time right. And you don't have to be in a certain position in your career. You don't need to have a certain you can really do it anytime, the things that you want to do. It's never too early, it's never too late, I hope. Especially for me, but like, I'm so impressed with what there's so many people out here in space and in the space industry that are doing these different things, great communicators, that have lots of different backgrounds and lots of different skills and lots of different education levels and lots of different positions. And it's like everybody is doing these super great things. It doesn't just take one particular skill set or one particular role or anything like that. And so really, pursue the ideas that you have, take the risks, and hopefully you'll be thrilled with what comes out of it.
That's very inspiring. I know, like, I tend to also, I mean, a lot of students feel like, oh, I'm not qualified for this specific position, or maybe I shouldn't apply to this one internship role or start this new initiative that I want to do because I'm not qualified. And we tend to say no to ourselves before other
Yes.
people do. And I've heard this
Yes.
one really great saying. It's like, don't say no to yourself, like let someone else say that to you, but at least you tried and you put yourself
Yeah.
out there and you learned from that experience. And just like you said, it's like very simple, just do it. But it takes a lot of confidence to get there. But sometimes hearing that from someone who's already been through, some of those rougher parts of their career and has seen it, it's really comforting for younger students to know, or younger professionals, or really just anyone, any stage of their career. Sometimes taking that like jump and that like, okay, I have an idea and I'm just going to take it forward. I don't know if it'll work out or not, but I'm going to at least try. And so
Yeah.
I think that sort of like mindset is, like you said, just very important for young students and someone who's just trekking into their career. And I know I definitely will be taking that advice to heart, and I'm sure everyone who's listening will as well. I had a really wonderful time speaking with you today. So thank you so much, Dr. Rice, for doing this interview and for sharing about your work. I'm really excited to see how StarTorialist continues to grow over the next few years, and how it grows more momentum with people in all sorts of backgrounds. And so I'm just very excited for the future. So thank you so much for doing this interview today.
Thanks. So nice to chat with you today.
Thank you.